Thank you. This is a question for Scott Ludlam. Has George Brandis yet managed to get a handle on what metadata is, and has he been able to articulate it?
I think the session is very timely because of the terror raids that have gone on in the last week. And I think the purpose of these is clearly to build support for an unpopular war, try and build support for an unpopular government, to terrorise Muslim people, to divide the community. And I mean, you can see the results of it. The Grand Mufti of Australia has reported that since the terror raids there's been an increase in Islamophobic attacks. There's been leaflets dropped in a mosque in Logan denouncing Muslims. Gold Coast City Council has rejected its own planning committee's advice to accept a mosque development. So on and so forth. Corey Bernardi's on tweeting again about banning the burqa. It's just horrible. It's very serious, guys. I mean, this is a serious thing, and I think the Greens have a role to play here. They need to be seen in the media articulating the anger about this. They need to be seen not saying that they accept ASIO's advice, but denouncing ASIO. Denouncing ASIO as part of the problem, not part of the solution. I'll just finish on this point. Brendan Malloy's point about alternative technologies. I agree with alternative technologies, all in favour of them, but I think we have to be careful. We have to confront the state, not hide from it. I don't think that the solution lies in hiding behind dark mail. We need to take on and confront the state's laws to make them a dead letter.
For Brendan and Scott, mainly just a question about the fact that it seems abundantly clear that the Attorney General's Department is the driving force behind a lot of draconian legislation, and how is it the role for civil society and the Greens in particular to take on them as opposed to the political parties as well, seeing as no matter who's in government, they're going to be going along with it. How is it possible to defeat unelected bureaucrats in this sphere?
I think Brandis's view of metadata did us an enormous favour. If these people were any good at their jobs, we'd be in a lot more trouble than we are. So I think the interview that he gave and the PM gave on the same day has significantly set them back. But they, recovered. He was back full of bluster and bombast in Parliament, and 2 weeks later. I think what it reflected, if anything, is that there are differences of views about how these proposals get forwarded. I think there's no question at all that the whole idea of 2-year metadata is completely crap. They're already arguing for 5. They'll come after content later, even if they don't get it this time. We've got to see this, I guess, as a part of a series of pushbacks that continually just a bit here and a bit here, like the boiling frog. And so they just didn't have their messaging straight on the day. It's kind of irrelevant, and maybe this goes back to your question, which is a very good one about the Attorney General's Department. We see effectively this sort of sequence of Attorney Generals come through, and it's the same people behind the scenes inside the department put the same ideas up and just inch them forward a bit at a time, and it's kind of relentless. So I think that comment's quite perceptive. It's a lot deeper than just George Brandis being a twit. If anything, I think he's doing us a favour. Just a quick note on your comment about confronting the government. I think that is okay, but you still need the freedom to organise as part of that confrontation. And I fear that actually encryption is increasingly going to need to become a part of that. The degree of surveillance that the Occupy movement was under, that land rights campaigners are under, that people doing climate change activism are under, means we actually need to protect ourselves better and adopt a better security culture ourselves. So I guess for me that's part of the confrontation.
I'll just quickly go to your comment. I didn't speak so much on attacking the state head-on because mostly the other speakers went to that point. But as Scott just said, while the government makes gains making it much more difficult for us to organise, we need to have the technological capability to fight back so we can take the fight to the government. Because if they can watch literally everything we can do and they can create laws to stop us doing the things they don't like, we need the ability to actually organise still. And without technologists making stuff that is easy for everybody to use to do this, then we lose by default. But the other question of how do we defeat unelected bureaucrats, I've been trying to answer this question for a while. As I said, I make a lot of freedom of information requests, Attorney General's Department being one of my main targets. But one of our other members, Rodney Sikowski, made a request for 2 years metadata for the Secretary of the Attorney General's Department. And they said it would take something like 2 years to find all the data. Apparently they don't keep even his diary in discrete form. So while it's impossible to even get information on what higher up bureaucrats are doing in the Attorney General's Department, it makes it very difficult. We essentially need reform of the public service so that high-level bureaucrats are put under the same level of scrutiny as elected politicians, because while politicians go through churn. The bureaucrats very rarely do. You have the same guy at the top of the Attorney General's department for a decade or two, popping the same tired ideas based on nothing on their tables until one finally says, okay.
Can I just add one point there? I mean, obviously the personnel of the Attorney General's Department and ASIO are sort of flowing between each other. Actually, there's an overlap there. Also, I think in terms of public servants, that's an aspect of what Ruby was talking about with the secrecy of government. I mean, once you could actually, let's say a junior person in the Attorney General's Department, you could certainly ring them and talk to them and ask them questions. You know, that was all possible. That's not possible in any way. Now, the whole of public service is actually behind a wall. You can't get anywhere unless you go through a media officer. And so you cannot talk to anyone. That's a big problem.
I honestly believe that public servants mostly, especially the higher-ups, should be able to be put under the same level of scrutiny that we would expect from an elected representative. Quite simply, there is no reason to keep policy decisions and the rationales behind those policy decisions secret.